Hey everybody, happy Thursday. Yes, we have a Thursday here. We have a second day of recovery. I have a very special co-host today. This is Mr. Todd Shapiro of the Todd Shapiro Show on Sirius XM. If you have not checked that out, you will want to. Todd, welcome to my show.
James, I'm so elated to be here. I'm almost in awe that I am. And you know, I've been following your story. I've been watching everything you're doing, and I'm a big investor myself. I love the cannabis space especially. I work with a lot of different cannabis companies on sort of some brand strategy and IR work. But you're the pioneer of this, and I really just piggybacked off your model. I stole everything you were doing to try and make some money.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Todd. You can come back anytime you want.
And look at the blazer. I mean, come on.
Todd was kind enough to have me on his show a week ago, and actually I'm going to go on again this Friday just because we have a great conversation every time we've met so far, and this is like the beginning of a long bromance I think we got going here. Would you say that's an overcategorization?
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, at the end of the day, most people, I make good first impressions, and then people hate me. No, I'm just. I mean it though. I mean it sincerely. James has a way of speaking to an audience in a space that can sometimes be very confusing, and in investing, and learning the lingo of investing, and that's something that I've tried to really piggyback off of to let people know. I don't even know. Am I supposed to look in the camera at times, or you?
You can
or
look
how
at
does
the
this
camera
work
when you want to address the audience directly. You feel free. You do whatever you want.
I don't
You're
do
a professional co-host.
There's a reason why this mug is traditionally on radio, but no, really, there's a really wonderful approach that you have, and the knowledge that you have, and the knowledge that you share for people, and I think that's important because people they really do want to take control of their own wealth. They want to have an idea and belief in a company and hit that, that big win, as everyone speaks about, to live, not the American dream, because the American dream meant a middle class lifestyle. Actually, that's what the American dream was. It was industrialization. It was get a job, work 9 to 5, have a family with a white picket fence. They want to live the Kardashian dream. They want that opportunity to do that. And dream. We follow people on Instagram these days, and we look at them. And we go, we want that life, but you got to do it carefully and diligently. And that's what you're sort of broaching. You're showing that it's not just a gamble. There's calculated risks here.
Yeah, well, that's very kind of you to say. Very kind of you to say, Todd. I'm humbled, but that is actually exactly what we're trying to do. Is we're not trying to tell people what to do. We're trying to show them what we're doing and give them a sense of why we're doing it, so they understand why we take so much glee in losing so much money. No, but seriously, it's all about trying to make more money than you lose. Yep. And this is the part of the whole experience is you have to lose money before you're going to make money. And you have to understand that losing money is not necessarily such a bad thing as long as you're making far more than you're losing. And I mean, the guys at Renaissance Technologies, these are the guys who run the scalping programs, the high frequency technology programs that run right on the mainstream internet in New York City, who their mantra is never lose money, which is probably why it trades at $1 billion a share, and you can't actually buy any shares of it. But yeah, it's all about trying to make sufficient, or try to learn enough about your own financial capabilities to, make money instead of losing money, and exactly as you say, not entrust it to third parties who definitely, without exception, do not have their interests aligned with yours.
And quite candidly, as sort of a creative guy most of my life, and working in radio, I'm 20 years in media now, as of November actually. And don't go into Canadian media, anybody, by the way. It's like such a waste of time. Hey. Learn the market, learn the markets. don't be intimidated. I used to be intimidated by Bay Street folks, by Wall Street folks, and it's funny. There's a swagger, there's a way about them. At the end of the day, if they all figured out this algorithm that you can't even buy into, every single one of them wouldn't be working today. So you start to realize that just because there sort of feels like there's this inside group, it doesn't mean that you can't just talk to them like a human. You can't just have a conversation, get to know who they are, get to know their family, because we all have that. We all have that in common, emotion. And as much as they don't want to show it, get to know them, they open up to you, and you learn the lingo, and you become comfortable around a space that, to be honest, is the most fun space in the world. I mean, just look at the ticker going across on the bottom here. It's elaborate, and it's wonderful to be a part of.
Well, that's a very open-hearted and optimistic viewpoint, I would say, because I like to go and meet guys from Bay Street, and I look at them the same way as they look at me, as a potential meal.
Sure.
And if there's one piece of meat on the table, one of us is going to eat, and that's largely the mindset that pervades the full-time professional capital markets professional. Is it's a competition, and it's a competition for the last scrap, and but it's conducted under a very civilized and friendly demeanor.
Fair enough. Passive aggressive, I say. Which I call Canadians most of the time. Everyone says Canadians are so nice. I go south of the border a lot. I'm like, no, we're nice. You walk away, you're like, that's a piece of shit, But at the end of it, you get to know people, right? And if you don't get to know the people, then I don't think you're going to have a lot of success in this industry, because what do we always come back to, James? Management teams, people you can trust, people who have long-term vision, people who have done it before, people who are repeating their patterns in wonderful ways, not the shysters of the world, not just the people telling you a story and a concept that's never going to happen because they want you as part of that raise. You want to work with people that you believe in, and to be honest, I want people to believe in me, and I want to believe in you and everyone else who I don't have a lot of time anymore. I have kids at home, I have a radio show, I'm doing a ton of brand strategy work. When I commit my time, I want to make sure it's with people I trust.
You bet, Todd. We'll be right back with our special guest, Todd Shapiro, here. But first, here's Laura McCallum with today's Cannabis News.
Here's what's making cannabis headlines this Thursday, October 3rd, 2019. Aurora Cannabis provided a corporate update on its global operations, business units, and portfolio of strategic investments. The company also launched Aurora Insider, an investor-focused blog which will provide regular updates and insight into the operations at Aurora. According to the press release, Aurora's global facilities have achieved significant milestones. The company's global market expansion is continuing in medical cannabis and hemp markets, and they are pleased with their network of strategic partners' execution. Canopy Rivers announced that in connection with the financing announced with TerraSend Corp yesterday, it has acquired ownership and control over $13.2 million of unsecured convertible debentures of 333,723 common share purchase warrants of TerraSend. Canopy Rivers acquired the debentures and the warrants for investment purposes only, and not with a view to materially affect control of TerraSend. Green Growth Brands has opened its 150th Seventh Sense Botanical Therapy CBD mall-based shop. GGB will provide a sales update on the performance of Seventh Sense shops and e-commerce on its earnings call for the fourth quarter and fiscal year 2019 ended June 30th. Origin House announced that the company's distribution arm, Continuum, has entered into an agreement to become an exclusive distributor of Cannabineers. Cannabineers is the producer of Two Roots, Creative Waters, and Baskin cannabis-infused products in California. Planet 13 Holdings has served an average of 1,970 customers per day in September at an average ticket of $94.73 from the Planet 13 Las Vegas Cannabis Entertainment Complex. Construction on Phase 2 expansion, which includes a restaurant, cafe, event center, and customer-facing production facility, are all expected to be completed by mid-October. Sundial Growers has launched Palmetto, a new brand of Sundial's recreational brand portfolio. Palmetto is synonymous with high-quality and convenient cannabis, offering pre-rolls and vape pens for customers to experience. Tetra Biopharma announced that the FDA has determined that the company's COMS kit can be evaluated as a combination drug and device product. The COMS kit is comprised of two constituents, Tetra's lead drug COMS and the Mighty Medic device of Storz & Bickel, a wholly owned subsidiary of Canopy Growth. Based on the FDA's determination, the COMS kit has been assigned to the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research for pre-market review and further assessment. Vivo Cannabis expects to commence the first harvest at its Chemetz facility in Napanee, Ontario, in the fourth quarter of 2019. Vivo also unveiled its 2020 plans for the facility, which include an accelerated planted schedule and the contemplated use of 5 additional acres of land adjacent to the existing warehouses. And that's your news for today. To keep up to date with all things cannabis, visit the Cannabis Daily on MidasLetter.com.
Hey everybody, today has been a rather spectacular day in the cannabis markets. I'm looking at the 4 cannabis charts here right now of the largest index. You can see that the large cap index is up 3.76%, small cap's up 0.64%, venture index is up 1.97%, and even the CSE index is up 1.74%. This is the second day in the row, and I think, Todd, you will agree this constitutes a bit of a recovery.
Well, I think everyone needed a bit of a recovery right now. So is this is what they call the dead cat bounce? Is that, or is the dead cat bounce mean it goes back down again?
Dead cat bounce means it goes back down again.
So is this a fear right now for some investors?
Well, let's just say that the recovery has not taken root as strongly as it will have once the fear of a dead cat bounce has passed. And I would say, a dead cat bounce can be, it could be 2 weeks of up and then it collapses, gives back everything it gained over that 2 weeks and then continues lower. That's a large dead cat bounce, but it can happen over 2 weeks. A dead cat bounce can be like, the market bounces higher than in a downtrend within a day. And then it goes lower. That's a dead cat bounce.
Okay.
So it can be in terms of the time, it can be huge, but generally, you only identify a dead cat bounce in the rearview mirror. Once it's happened, you can say, "Oh, that was a dead cat bounce." Because while it's going up, we're like, "Woohoo! Bull market's back, baby!" But then as soon as it plunges, it's like,
It's an amazing space in terms of the volatility, and it's really interesting. And having sort of dealt within the industry now for 2 to 3 years, we've seen a lot of these trends, and to the point where if you were to ask me 3, 4, 5 years ago, could I handle volatility like we're seeing, 25% down one day, 8% up the next day, a 33% swing in one day? You would think that would make someone insane. And it's almost peculiar how comfortable you are with a little bit of a decline. This one, I think, is, we're at 52-week lows for a lot of the companies. We were anyway yesterday. So I think it started to get to a point of true trepidation. People were fearing it all. But there's a calmness to it. And eventually, I don't know what you feel like, James, but certain companies need to be weeded out. That's what happens. Bubbles pop. The right management teams, the right companies succeed, and there probably will be some M&As soon, and you're going to start to see that the cream always rises to the crop.
Well, if there was one overriding sentiment that governs capital markets, it is survival of the fittest. It is very much a Darwinistic environment. The weak fall, and the strong eat the weak and continue, to grow. So yeah, that's exactly what happens, and this is good case in point. This correction, which started in April of this year, has seen an average of 50% in value lost across the board. But that means that some companies, and I'm going to pull up the CSE index here because these are some names that were household words in the cannabis space back in the bull market days, and I'm going to click this and reorder them by order of the most biggest percent change. Or actually, let's go look at the absolute price. So okay, there's all these companies, if you look on the chart, that are at 1 cent. Brain Grid, 1 cent. So here's a company that's lost a lot more than 50%. It's come down from, well, if we go back, let's give it a 3-year look so you can get okay, it doesn't go back. So it came to trade at 20 cents and never really did anything. It's now 1 cent. And so that's like losing 99% of its value.
Sounds like a good company to buy for, it would be a Shell one day,
Well, it is a Shell now,
currently,
arguably.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see, here's ICC International Cannabis. That thing was, what was it? 52-week high, 91 cents in this year. That's lost almost all of its value. There's tons of examples of companies that are not going to recover from this correction, and that is the essence of a real correction. Is it removes some competitors from the playing field once and for all, and they become shells, and they will be rolled back, restructured, renamed, new shareholders, new deal. Chances are it'll be a whole new business sector. And that's why one of the keys to survival as your self-directed investor is never become sector specific. Because regardless, as time will prove to you time and again, sectors are always temporary. Uptrends are, everything is temporary. All is temporary in the market. So today it's a cannabis bull market, or arguably it's a bear market after a bull market. But what we're seeing right now is a metals market coming back. And so that's why at Midas Letter,
Are you bull on it?
Well, I'm super bullish on metals because ultimately the recovery that happened in the financial markets after 2008 was a result of rampant money printing, fiat currency printing, and zero interest rate policy. The extent of those mechanisms to ameliorate the global economy and monetary supply system have now run their course, and there's no tools left in the central banker's toolbox. And that means that the only thing that's going to be of value are real world assets, particularly metals. My next guest is Mark Selby, who has been at the forefront of not one, but two previous bull markets in one of the most exciting yet underappreciated metals in the whole mix, and that's nickel. Nickel is probably the second most important ingredient in lithium-ion batteries after lithium, and in fact, Tesla started replacing all of its cobalt with nickel through various scientific means and plans to eliminate cobalt completely. But here's that interview with Mark Selby, was just a couple hours ago. I'm joined now by Mark Selby, incoming CEO of Canada Nickel Company. Mark, welcome back.
Thanks, James. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, Mark, Canada Nickel Company is self-explanatory.
Yep.
It's basically been formed as a result of a discovery in Ontario. Tell me about this discovery.
Yeah, I mean, I've been around nickel for 20 years. I was at Inco early on in my career, and then the last 10 years with RNC, where we successfully developed the Dumont project. In nickel, there's actually very, very few real new discoveries, and this discovery that we made, there's 4 holes in. It's early days, but because of what we know at Dumont, the geophysics basically gives you a pretty good sense of how big it could be, and the anomaly that's there is bigger than what we had at Dumont. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm encouraged by the mineralogy we've seen, the geology we've seen, and the nice thing about the project is, unlike a lot of other nickel projects that are, could be remote, relatively small scale, this is just outside Timmins. You literally drive past the Kidd Creek mine, and another 10 kilometers past that is where this deposit's sitting right underneath the highway. So you've got all the major infrastructure in place. And, because of the recipe that we've got from the work we've done at Dumont, we'll be able to advance this project pretty quickly. So.
Right. So the grades of the drilling that's occurred so far on this property are pretty impressive, though a non-mining person might think, well, that's low grade, 0.25 to 0.28% nickel, but over 500 meters, there's probably some high grade in there. So how do the economics of that play out?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things with Dumont is we're able to demonstrate, that these large low grade nickel deposits are just like, large low grade copper deposits. So, for investors who are used to looking at big copper deposits, these are analogous to that. So, nickel prices are 2 to 3x what a copper price is. So, a good copper deposit would be 0.5 or 0.6%. So, 0.25 to 0.33 translates pretty nicely into those type of grades, for a copper deposit. So, and again, most of the big copper deposits today are, way up in the remote part of the Andes. So to find something of that scale sitting literally underneath the highway, 15 kilometers outside of Timmins is a tremendous, I mean, again, that's why hopefully my excitement about this opportunity is coming across.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so the conventional wisdom suggests that we need $20,000 per ton nickel in order to put a new mine into production. But those are looking at traditional large-scale bulk tonnage low-grade mines. And so is this also going to take require $20,000 per ton nickel to put into production?
Yeah, no, I think if you go into more remote locations or, into laterite projects, which have a lot more capital intensity that's required, again, the Dumont feasibility study, was economic at $7.75 a pound. So it's $17,000 a ton. And today we're sitting just under $18,000 a ton. So, again, extremely early days for Crawford. But, again, if we're able to prove up to something looks like Dumont and potentially better than Dumont, then, we can, you could deliver it at today's nickel prices.
Wow, great. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the price of nickel. So we're looking at a graph on my NDI of the historical price graph of nickel for the last year.
Yeah.
And it has gone up from $12,400 US dollars per ton to where it sits today at $17,000 per ton, an increase of like 30-40%.
Yeah.
How likely is that price trend to continue?
Yeah, no, I mean, one of the things that's exciting about nickel is that every 15 to 20 years, we go through a real super cycle in terms of prices. So, in the late 60s, nickel got to $18,000 a ton in 1968 dollar terms. So that's, probably $100,000 a ton today. In the late 80s, we went through another massive boom in nickel prices that got up to $9 or $10, $22,000 a ton at that time. And then, obviously, people around in the mid 2000s, we saw the run where we went from, $4,000 a ton to $54,000 a ton. Now, it doesn't happen in a straight line. In fact, I think nickel prices are going to roll over a little bit, before year end. But, fundamentally, the EV market is going to need 1 million tons by 2030. That's sort of the midpoint of most people's forecasts. The other part about nickel, because I think most investors, you haven't had really a lot of ways to invest in it recently. It's a very high demand growth metal. So underlying demand growth has been 4 or 5% a year. That we have to find another 1 million tons to satisfy the base demand from the current uses. So in 10 years, we need to find 2 million tons of nickel.
And how many tons are coming into production in the next 10 years?
Right now there should be another 500,000 plus coming from Indonesia, which will double production from Indonesia.
But Indonesia is about to stop exporting.
Exporting ore, and then people are going to build plants in Indonesia to transform it in country. But the reality is there's nowhere near that number of projects on the books today to be able to deliver that amount of nickel. So. And the other part about the structure of the nickel industry is Indonesia has been the bulk of the growth for the last 10 years. And so what's happened is, they've become the dominant source of supply. And Robert Friedland at the BMO conference last year talked about nickel being the new gasoline, because really in terms of the battery, that's going to be the primary metal by weight in an EV car. And so Indonesia will end up representing more of the nickel market than Saudi Arabia did of the oil market at its peak. If you add in the Philippines and then take New Caledonia, they control that. Those three countries will control more of the nickel market than OPEC did of the oil market in the early 70s. So, you've got three countries that are cash constrained with a critical mineral. The temptation to throw on export duties and so forth on top of it, is going to be pretty great. So, owning nickel assets outside of those three countries, I think, investing in oil in 1971 was a pretty good trade. I think getting into nickel today, for multiple reasons, is going to be one of those great once in a decade trades.
Yeah, you bet. So Tesla must be very interested in what's happening with this particular deposit in that it's so close to their battery factory in Nevada.
Yeah, I can't speak yet with Tesla on that one, but I've been involved with discussions, with other car companies and other car companies,
Tesla
with
did
regard
make
to
mention of that.
with regard to nickel properties outside of Indonesia. And they're, a car company doesn't want to have their supply chain tied to, a developing country that has turned their minds on and off several times, like Indonesia. So, I think, again, the great attraction with this, particular deposit is, it's one of the only new projects that can deliver, big quantities has the potential to be a big nickel deposit in a low-risk jurisdiction that would be very attractive to those companies.
At a conference in May, Tesla managers spoke of the importance of continued investment in the mining of battery metals, particularly nickel. And Tesla has, in fact, reduced its cobalt content and increased its nickel content and intends to replace cobalt completely with nickel.
Yes.
So that to me, signifies a huge uptake. Battery metals, or the battery industry, is currently 3% of the global demand for nickel, and it's expected to increase to 12%. So that's part of your 2 million tons that is needed.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, as we sell more EVs, and every EV, again, with Tesla, everyone's trying to figure out how to jam more nickel in and less cobalt. It just brings down the price and it increases the energy density. So, which means you can drive farther.
So how soon until this deposit could go into production?
Oh, I mean, again, it's early days here, but in terms of being able to advance it rapidly, we've got the recipe from Dumont.
Right.
We know exactly with geophysics, sort of where the better parts of the deposit are. That took 7 years and $100 million to figure that out, but we now fully understand that. So, with what we've got there, we can we'll finish the first phase of concept drilling, and the financing we have now will allow us to sort of get through that first phase. And then, if is there what we think is there, then we'll move into rapidly drilling out the resource, getting pre-feasibility study done, and then trying to push it forward, as fast as possible. Because I can tell you, in our discussions at RNC with the various automakers, their questions for Dumont were, it was, when can you double it again? Can you double it twice? Again, in terms of just, crazy questions. The thing is, again, for people who are sitting back, you see literally the industry is investing tens of billions of dollars in battery plants. They're building tens of billions of dollars in precursor plants that make the stuff that goes into the batteries.
Yes.
It's just a matter of time, and the industry is going to need to spend a lot of money to provide the mine supply that's got to feed those precursor plants to feed the batteries. So, they're not quite banging down the door yet, but they will be, sooner than later.
You bet. Okay, so Canada Nickel was formed out of some sort of creative sort of company jigging.
Yeah.
So when does Canada Nickel itself, when can investors buy Canada Nickel as a publicly traded company?
Sure. So, again, advancing early stage projects in this market's been tricky. So these guys, found a way to get the project to where it is. The nice thing about the deposit, about Canada Nickel, is it's going to be a nice clean new company, 50 million shares outstanding. We're going to be dividending it out of Noble. Both Noble and Spruce Ridge will have shares in Canada Nickel. So between now and the end of the year, investors can buy either of those stocks, and some of those shares will be dividended out of those companies. And then we'll be looking to go public as soon as possible, targeting somewhere around the end of November, first half of December.
Mm-hmm. All right, Mark, that's a great update. I'm excited about nickel now again, thanks to you for the third time in my life.
Yeah.
So let's hope that it works out as well as it has the last few times, and we'll have you back as soon as there's more to talk about. Thanks for joining me.
Sure,
today.
that's great.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Make sure you never miss a show by subscribing to our YouTube channel and clicking on the little notifications bell. If you're interested in getting monthly actionable investment ideas in the cannabis space to your inbox, subscribe to the newsletter at midasletter.com. Anyways, I'm looking at a chart of nickel right now. If you want to see why we're getting so excited about nickel, it has come from $12,000 USD per ton to current levels just under $18,000 per ton. That is a 50% rise in price, and that is being driven by the increasing demand from electric vehicles. Currently, as we said during that piece, electric vehicle demand for nickel currently occupies 3% of the global demand for nickel. It's going to rise to 12% by 2023, which means we need to find 2 million more tons of nickel, and that has not happened yet. So that's why we like nickel as one of our trades. That is going to be something when cannabis finally falls out of bed once and for all, which it's definitely going to one day, just not anytime soon, I don't think, if we're to look at the recovery today.
Yeah, I agree. What about, I wanted to ask your thoughts on graphite and graphene. Is that to say, would you consider that within the nickel, increase? Do you see positive results there?
Well, graphite and graphene are certainly part of the electric vehicle revolution. Graphite and, well, graphene is interesting. Like I've got two huge investments that represent probably 50% of my net worth. One of them is in a cannabis company. The other one is in a graphene company, a company in Australia that actually manufactures graphene building supplies. So I'm telling you that, Todd, because I want to disclose that I'm very much invested in graphene. So typically anything I say is going to be pro-graphene, but
I am too. In the one company we talked about on my show, on Ceylon Graphite.
Oh, right, Ceylon Graphite, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ceylon Graphite is really interesting because it's one of the only deposits in the world of the vein-type graphite, which is extremely high grade. Yeah. And that's funny because I've actually written about the company. I've had the CEO on the show, and I follow it with one eye. I don't own stock, so
I own stock. I don't work with them. It's not like a given stock. It's not options or anything. But it's just a story that I really believe in.
Yeah.
And again, good management. You said this on my show. Sorry, I'm all over the place here.
Fine.
The greatest thing, and again, this is for the Stockhouse Joe investor, for the new investor. You can pick up the phone and call a CEO. You said this to me, and I've had this experience. They will call you back. What other company, especially if they're on the CSE and stuff, you know what I mean? What companies don't do that. CEOs aren't approachable. And to me, when you get to know a CEO who gives you time, whether you buy 10 shares or $100,000 worth of shares, not that I've done that amount, but it's a significant chunk. They give you time, and then you get to know the people. Back to what I was saying earlier.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's kind of what brought me to small caps in the first place, was that investing in large cap companies, first of all, you don't know what's going on with the share price. You don't know if there's a fund that's about to unload $5 million to cover a short position in another fund, or who has had a falling out with the CEO and is just doing it to spite the CEO. You can't follow that stuff in large cap companies because there's just too much going on. There's too many shares, there's too many investors, there's too many people, there's too many events, there's too much competition. It's harder to keep the whole picture in front of your eyes and in front of your your perception. In the small cap space, it's like in Canada, the nickel companies, for example, you go to the PDAC, which is the largest mining conference in the world, and there will be 200 gold companies and 100 silver companies, but there'll be 10 nickel companies. And so within one conference, you can know all of the CEOs of every prospective nickel company operating on Earth. So it's you're in a position to call them up and say, hey, I saw that press release. Is that good news? Is that bad news? How does that really fit in with all of the body of the other news? And that's the great thing about that. Now, the downside of that, though, is you also expose yourself to some pretty direct promotion.
Yes.
The CEO is obviously fully invested in what he's doing for a living every day, what he's taken people's money to believe in. So you always have to temper those connections with, the understanding that you're talking to a guy who is fully invested in any given
He's going to tell you what you want to hear. Yeah, it's interesting. So to toot my own horn a little bit, after doing media for 20 years and interviewing people for literally in long form conversations for hours at a time, you get to have a read on people, and it's not like I'm a Danny Negreanu poker player who can tell, tells and things like this. But there's everything in life to me is about intent or maliciousness. What is the intent? And in business, in comedy, it doesn't matter the sector. And you that's why you need to spend time. I always go back to this with management teams. Get to know who they are. Learn about what their intent. You can get a vibe. If you get this weird vibe, don't invest in that company. And even if it goes up, you had a weird vibe, it wasn't for you. And at the end of the day, and this is, I won't say who, but he always comes back to this model. He always tells me this. He goes, if this glass of water costs $2 to make, but you're selling it for $1, that business is not going to do well at the end of the day. So at the end, there's a simple formula in business, and there's a lot that they'll tell you in the stock world, and you can go and read and whatever is happening, forecasting this and that. Get a feel for what they're producing, how much they're producing it for, what the burn rate is. Learn what a burn rate is. It's very simple. What they're spending a month, how much money they raised. If they're honest businessmen, they're not going to take and just spend frivolously. They're going to be calculated about that. Ask these questions, and you'll see that people have a long-term goal.
You bet. Todd, can I ask you, are you a consumer of CBD?
I am a consumer of CBD, yes.
Really? And why do you consume CBD?
So I get inflammation in my back at times, well documented. I hate traditional medicines. I hate even the Advils and the Tylenols of the world. I don't think I've been on an antibiotic now in 15 years.
Okay.
I'm not an avid user of CBD, but definitely when I get the back flare-ups, I'll literally just get oil and rub it like right on my back.
Perfect.
Oil that, really was meant to ingest and stuff.
Yep.
And I really like it. And the odd time, like if I'm up north at the cottage, you just want to chill out a little bit.
Sure.
I will indulge.
Okay. My next guest is a medical doctor who is quite the advocate for CBD as a replacement for opiates in the treatment of pain, and for CBD is a general treatment for pain. Dr. Murdoch Kalegi is with the Arthritis Foundation. He's the senior medical advisor to Elevate CBD, and here's the conversation we had just a little while ago. I'm joined now by Dr. Murdoch Kalegi, who is the Senior Medical Advisor to Elevate CBD. Dr. Kalegi, welcome.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, sure. Dr. Kalegi, you have quite a deep medical history with CBD, more so than most people I've ever talked to, and you are an advocate for CBD for chronic pain as an opiate alternative. Can you give me a background on how you came to arrive at that sort of mindset?
Absolutely. So I'm an emergency physician. I work in the emergency department. And here's what I see in the emergency department. I see opiate overdoses every single shift, some of them deadly. And so seeing that, it made me wonder, are there alternative, better therapies for pain? We do have other therapies for pain, but unfortunately, a lot of them don't work in certain groups. For example, we have anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen or Aleve, but that can cause increased bleeding. It can cause problems in the gut. It can cause impaired blood flow to the kidneys. We have things like Tylenol, which most people don't consider that strong a pain reliever, but that can also cause inflammation in the liver. So in exploring what are other options, I became increasingly interested in CBD, and I became interested in it for various reasons. One of which is, while I've seen every kind of overdose in the emergency department, including even marijuana overdoses, fairly frequently actually, if people don't have a tolerance or they unintentionally take a higher dose like an edible, I have yet a single time to see a CBD overdose. Meanwhile, I've talked to hundreds, maybe thousands of people at this point who swear by CBD has helped their pain. And when you combine all those people that have found benefit with the increasing amount of research demonstrating a benefit, well, then that made me start to pay attention.
Yeah, okay, interesting. There's been a lot of research to suggest in areas where CBD is widely available, there's a correlated decrease in the incidence of death from opiate overdose. So is that because CBD, where it's available, is appealing to people who might be having abuse issues with prescribed opiates?
And the way I think about it is this: no one wants to be using opiates, dependent on opiates. No one wants to be addicted to opiates. The reason it happens is because, as I mentioned, we just haven't had that many good therapeutic options for acute or chronic pain. So what I think we're seeing is more and more people are finding another option, CBD, which helps with pain, partly through an anti-inflammatory mechanism. So a lot of people also are experiencing decreased inflammation, such as people with arthritis. And so because they're finding that alternative, they don't necessarily need to go to what had become such a common therapy for pain, and that was opiates. And so with less use of opiates, I think we're seeing less overdoses.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so do you see a future where CBD replaces opiates for the treatment of pain, post-operative pain, inflammation-related pain? Do you see it becoming a bigger part of the U.S. pharmacopoeia over time?
Well, with the proliferating amount of research, I think we're certainly going to see that. Unfortunately, medicine's been a little slow on the uptake, partly because of the stigma around CBD, because CBD can be derived from a couple different sources. One of those sources is marijuana. So a lot of people, when they hear CBD, they think marijuana. And so they think controlled substance. They think it will get them high. They think maybe they can become addicted to it. They think of it like a drug. But CBD is not the component of marijuana that causes all of those things. CBD is a separate component, and it's actually found in other sources. Part of the reason it's legal in so many places now is because it can also be derived from hemp. And the CBD derived from hemp is the exact same as the CBD derived from marijuana, meaning it has the exact same benefit. So I think as some of this stigma and misconception goes away, yeah, we're going to start to see this uptake in medicine. Last week was the first time we saw a national health organization, the Arthritis Foundation, actually put guidelines around CBD use because they recognize hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of arthritis sufferers are already taking and experiencing benefit from CBD. Maybe it's time to at least have some guidelines around the use so this can be more programmatic in its prescription and use in therapy.
Sure. The FDA has started to hold hearings consulting with the public, essentially, and other stakeholders in the hemp industry, and they're trying to, arrive at a sort of policy towards CBD. Is there a risk to the current availability of CBD? Should the FDA decide that it needs to become more of a regulated substance than it is now?
While there's always a theoretical risk, I don't think that's going to happen. And the reason why is, as I mentioned, CBD can be derived from different sources. One is marijuana, and while on the federal level and in many states, marijuana is still regulated, not fully legal. Hemp is fully legal in all 50 states. And so I do not anticipate seeing increased restriction on the use of hemp-derived CBD. In fact, I believe as a lot of the misconception goes away about CBD and that it can be derived from hemp and that it doesn't come with all these effects like getting you high, I think we're going to continue to have the legality in all 50 states like we do now, but I think we'll also have with that increased use by consumers as well as increased prescription use by healthcare practitioners.
Sure. And I've noticed in the media that you've been rather a vocal proponent of CBD for use in treating pain associated with professional sports injuries. And in fact, I read a piece earlier where you were commenting on the participation of Rob Gronkowski, the former star of the New England Patriots, as having become an advocate for CBD. How does CBD play into the treatments for professional sports, where, if I'm not mistaken, it's still more or less a banned substance?
So the one important thing to understand is it's being used, CBD, very widely in professional sports. As I mentioned, CBD derived from hemp is legal in all 50 states, and so ideally that's the type that's used. If it's marijuana derived, it's still the same CBD substance. So it is being used. And I think what athletes are finding is it's a better alternative than a lot of the things they were doing, because athletes were already experiencing pain, injury, inflammation. That has always been the case. And they've been using things to deal with that. I think some of those options have been less than ideal. For example, taking injections of anti-inflammatories, which can cause all of those side effects that I mentioned about bleeding and damage to the kidneys and gut. And so now they're finding this better anti-inflammatory option without those side effects. So part of the reason I'm an advocate, as you mentioned, is not because I'm saying CBD good, bad. I'm saying let's compare it to the alternatives that people are already doing, which is opiates, anti-inflammatory injections, and there's no doubt in my mind that CBD is a better alternative in terms of the risks it presents. It has a far lower risk profile.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that's great input, Dr. Kalegi. We're going to leave it there for now. We'll hope to come back to you soon. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks again for having me.
If you like the show, you'll love our website. Visit us at www.midasletter.com for interviews with key CEOs, cannabis news, and to subscribe to our newsletter. Tube.
Yeah.
But hey, how's it going, everybody?
Right.
Welcome back. So apparently CBD is good for pain relief, and athletes are embracing it. That's awesome. So we're not offside there.
I spoke on my Sirius XM show, which, by the way, is at 5 p.m., channel 167. Always plug, people. If you ever have an opportunity to be on anyone else's network, you plug what you do as well. And channel 167, and then my website, thetoddshapiroShow.com. I spoke to Jerry Rice, actually. And Jerry Rice, a famous receiver, three-time Super Bowl champion, Jerry Rice.
Of course.
And I asked him about that, and he danced around it because he was actually promoting his partnership with Rice and Pastoroni.
Okay.
You know, it was the worst. I'll be honest, it was the worst interview of all time. Jerry Rice is a legend, and I love the guy, even though I wasn't a 49ers fan. But man, what a respected individual on and off the field. But they do this PR stuff, and it just did not sound genuine at all. He's promoting Rice and Pastoroni. He was much like I was, he said, it's the San Francisco treat. Like, just nothing real about it. So I asked him about CBD, but you could tell I could tell he wanted to say that, like, he couldn't because he's promoting his thing now. You know, he doesn't want to go against the PR message or the brand. But you could tell that he thought it was a good thing. I could just tell, by the way, because he didn't shut it down either. And it's really important. Back to this, I work at a great company, bovadainc.com. They put the two-way humidity control packs into your flower to keep it fresh. And their whole thing is get people off this opioids. Let's do it in a much more natural way. These are plants growing out of the ground, and now we're hearing the shroom stuff. You know, this is a fungi that's growing, whether it's in or out. You know, like and the synthetic big pharma. We saw what happened with the Sacklers, like criminal stuff. Gross.
Yeah, criminal is right.
It is
literally.
It's and we've been stuck in a system for so many years, and now we have. With these phones and with our own networks, we have the ability, and of course legalization and decriminalization and things, we have the ability to do it more naturally. And I think it's important, and it will be really interesting for a stance for one of these big leagues to say, we agree that our athletes should be able to use CBD to heal, to get better.
Well, now is as good a time as any to mention our show sponsor, Halo Labs. Visit them at halocana.com is their website. But Halo has just come out with a dab tab product that gives you the ability to vaporize CBD in their vaporizer product, which is their Shatterizer product, rather, which is a remarkably cool way to actually do CBD without, getting high. And I mean, it's just incredible. It's an incredible device. If you haven't seen it, the Shatterizer, you can go see it on halocana.com. But don't forget, Halo Cana is our sponsor, or Halo Labs is our sponsor. And Kiran Sidhu, the CEO of Halo Labs, will be on the show tomorrow to talk about some of their revenue numbers in Oregon, where they've just done the biggest revenue numbers they've ever had in their company's history. Yeah,
and full disclosure, I mean, I work with the company as well. I help with brand strategy, and I've sort of helped with word of mouth IR. I love Kieran. I love the team there. I love what they're doing not only in Oregon, where you hear that they had sales of 1.8 million last month, record-setting month. I think by the time they do all the actual fixed numbers, because it takes time to fill those orders, something like 1.4 million, a massive growth. They're growing out of Oregon. They're in California. They're in Nevada. They have done deals now for branding and white labeling. They're working with Kaliva, which is Jay-Z's part of their big team. They're going to be in Africa and Lesotho, and they have a property there that they're going to grow. This is the type of company that I always encourage people. And full disclosure, I'm invested with them. I work with them, so there's compensation there. But always look at what the plans are. Talk to them and give Kieran a call. He's that type of guy.
Give him a call, for sure.
So I'm really excited by what Halo Labs is doing, for sure.
Again, don't hesitate to go check out their site at halocana.com. Speaking of companies that are doing amazing things and are going to continue to do so in the near future, Peter Horvath is a consumer packaged goods guru of the first order, having been responsible for some of the biggest successes in the whole concept of consumer packaged goods. He was the creative force behind Victoria's Secret and American Eagle, just to name a couple. But he's here joining us today. He's in town for the Canaccord Cannabis Conference. Here's a conversation we had just a short while ago. I'm here with Peter Horvath now, CEO of Green Growth Brands. Peter, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Peter, congratulations on opening your 150th CBD store. Tell me about that event and what it means for the whole Green Growth Brands.
Well, it's amazing. It's like a year ago, we were, in this industry, you get to talk about your business before you have one, and that's what we were doing. And it only took 5 months from no stores, no customers to 150 shops. And we're going to be at 209 by the end of this month in front of 1 billion footsteps because we were in the best locations through our partnerships with Simon Property Group, Brookfield, Westfield, the other developers. So, and think about it, in cannabis, there's companies that have been at this for 8 to 10 years that might have 24, maybe 2.5 dozen dispensaries open. It takes forever to open dispensaries. It's not easy.
Right.
This is something we could do in months. So we're excited to be in front of all those consumers.
Sure. And as a consumer packaged goods specialist of some renown, how important is the branding and the packaging to the consumers of CBD products, which are now prolific throughout the universe? I mean, I get 5 to 7 offers to buy CBDs online every day, which of course I don't take them up on because, well, I'm in Canada, I can get it down the street. But in the United States, it's very much a consumer packaged good product.
Yeah, so our approach, we looked at what everyone else is doing. We've got a product room that I love. When people come through our office, we go into the product room, we have everybody else's product and encourage everybody, including our associates, to try it. So the way we approach it is we think the formulations have come from a nutraceutical perspective because they don't measure up to the other personal care standards that we would consider acceptable. And I've got all these people that have worked in the beauty and personal care industry for decades. So I just said to them, look, I want you to make product that can bring the benefits of CBD, but the formulation should feel good, should smell good, and should be at an incredible value. And with all these stores that we have in front of like I said, 1 billion footsteps just in these first 200 malls, we're taking a mass approach. We're like, let's make it accessible. Let's remove all the barriers to entry. Let's focus on topicals. That's the first thing, so we don't have to age restrict the interaction with our assortment. Let's make the formulations on par with a Kiehl's and a Veda, products that are selling for twice as much as we sell, and then let's give it CBD. So we're using isolate. We're using the molecule. In theory, it's an anti-inflammatory. We let our customers make the claims. We don't make claims, and we pair it with aromatherapy. So I think the approach we're taking is let's make product that's going to be mass, is priced at mass, and is accessible, and isn't in a bodega or a nutraceutical or a head shop, but is actually right in front of your favorite other brands that you shop, and you've got someone who's knowledgeable, and it's an assortment you can navigate. So one long sentence, but that's what we're doing.
Cool. In terms of the demographic of CBD consumer, is it at this point is it completely broad-based across the consumer spectrum, or is it very sort of niche at this point, and does that create complications for you from a branding perspective?
So I'm going to reveal, our learning, okay? So we were like, we're going to be all about millennials and centennials. So the idea was 35 and under, because we knew that market from American Eagle most recently. And that's usually the market people are focused on. And we thought, okay, let's make the packaging, using consumer products, their approach is to make the packaging female friendly, because that's who's going to make the decision, but don't make it so female that men won't buy it. So we took that approach. So who do you think ended up the first customer was like a 65-year-old guy with a tool belt. And so what we're seeing is this democratic view of customers. We're not seeing an age or a gender bias. We're not seeing a demographic bias. So that's interesting to me. Now, it might change as the brands mature and as our business grows. But right now, it looks like if you go to our shops, you're going to see a sign that says CBD for all. It really is, that's our headline. It appears to be for everybody. And there are people who come to us with different problems they want to solve. Pain relief, sleep therapy, even just face care, which is just face care, you don't need CBD to do, but CBD might be better.
Right.
So we're waiting to hear from our customers. What do they think of all that?
Right. I had a house guest who was using our CBD, which is throughout the house, as eye cream. Oh, yeah. And we thought, we didn't say anything, but we thought, well, this is interesting, but she's using $160 per 30 milliliter jar of eye cream. And of course, we weren't going to mention anything. But so that's my next question. How important is price to the consumer in using topicals? I mean, the spectrum of available products online seems to be in this price constriction direction.
Yeah.
Is that going to influence the mainstream consumer model at all?
Well, I don't know. Here's the hypothesis. We looked at the pricing, and we saw that we got it down to a per milligram of CBD. We're just looking at, so what's your retail price per milligram of CBD? And what we saw is people at like 40 cents, 35 cents. Some people were even higher. We're selling it at 7 cents per milligram.
Wow.
So what that means is we're inexpensive, and we're tending to put heavy dosage of CBD in our product.
Right.
And that is because we come from a world, at the best brands in the world, where you're not looking at how do I make this cheaper. You're looking at how do I make people want it more.
Right.
And if I'm happy to increase the cost to me, if it makes it less likely to take a markdown because people have got to have it.
Sure.
So the approach we've taken, you're right. If you look at everybody else, it's expensive. It doesn't need to be. So what they're getting is an incredible margin rate and not much in the way of sales. I want a ton of sales at a very healthy margin rate.
Sure.
That's the choice. It's basically sell to the masses, dine with the classes. That's the world we come from. And again, we're leaning into what we know. What our competitors know, there's lots of ways to win in this industry, and they've picked their path. We've picked one that's about mass, about value, and about efficacy and quality in the formulations. Our beauty product, our health and wellness product will stand up against health and wellness product without CBD. And we've done blind testing, and it tells us it stands up and rates at the highest level. So in addition, we put CBD in it. Wow. I think everyone else isn't really looking at it that way. They're just like, we're going to bring the benefits of CBD to the world, but they're not putting it in familiar formulations. And formulation, like it or not, we buy with our nose most often.
Interesting. How important is you're behind some of the greatest successes in consumer packaged goods, Victoria's Secret, American Eagle. How important is that experience going to be, and how will we see that reflected in your CBD branding? Yeah,
so it's important because we were with businesses that were struggling to stay relevant as consumer patterns shifted. And those two businesses, at the times I was there, did a good job. Now one of them has kind of fallen off, but American Eagle in particular, it was a teen retailer when Abercrombie and them, they were it. 10 years later, 12 years later, they figured out how to stay relevant. But part of it is customer patterning. Be close to your customer, study all your competition, and then be aware of general trends, whether it's media or entertainment. Just understand the world that your consumers live in, because your job as a merchant is to look around corners. It isn't about, in this cannabis industry, everyone's talking about key performance indicators and loyalty programs, all stuff we were all talking about in the late 80s, and so, it's like cannabis industry, stop trying to emulate the 80s and 90s, do what the best in the world are doing right now, which is they're looking around the corner trying to figure out what consumers are going to want in the next 5 years. And just because cannabis and CBD right now appear to have, endless demand, prepare yourself for the world where you have to actually compete.
Right.
And the only way you can do that is to anticipate where the world is going, regardless of your product category. So that's what we brought to our approach. In cannabis, we're looking at it as localization, farm to table, if you will. To juxtapose that, the paradox is this, wow, so you're in 200 malls. And it's like, yeah, because we have access to the distribution, because nobody has done anything fresh in terms of kiosks in the middle of the malls, and we're going to do that. And we're the first ones to be vertical and have a broad assortment. So let's leverage our relationships with the developers and just go for it. And the result that might happen, we'll see what happens. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, so this is I think this is the fourth time that the whole cannabis industry has revalued itself to the downside after extremely exuberant rises to unprecedented levels. It always seems the downside is triggered by disappointing earnings in an industry where the speculative anticipation has now converted into an expectation for actual financial performance. How does Green Growth Brands sort of look out at the next 12 and 24 months in that context?
Well, we're saying the things that you're going to hear from everybody else because they're pretty obvious, which is, when are you going to be cash flow positive? When are you no longer going to need to be funded by the markets? Obviously, as you look at WeWork and Peloton, it's on everyone's mind. in our industry and outside of our industry.
Right.
So our focus is getting to that point where we're self-sustaining, and we see it. We've only been at this a year. The CBD business was only launched in February with one shop. And so. But we see that basically in the calendar 2020, we should be there. We're kind of thinking before the summer starts. That's the way we're looking. But in terms of valuations, think about I think we all were sucked into a valuation trap. Why did everybody decide to go public a year ago? And it's because it was easy money.
Right.
You could the capital was pretty inexpensive. Everybody did that. So now you got a lot of public companies that probably shouldn't be.
Right. And now they have to backfill the value.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. It's
like the consolidation is going to be kind of like, as people consolidate, it's going to be like a few of these players thank you for bailing me out, because
Right.
I look at some of the players out there. I was in Certera, who a year and a half ago I wasn't impressed with their stores, but I'm impressed with their story, which is they are private,
Right.
and they're one of the 3 businesses that have a significant footprint in Florida.
Sure.
I think that was smart versus. Us and other people, we're in 3 states. I think we're okay because we're concentrated in 3 states. But I see people who are in 11, 12 states because somebody told them you should be in as many states as possible. In real retail, you would never have an outpost store because you can't manage it. It's hard to make it successful. So, focusing on a few states and getting some critical mass. A company like Harvest has critical mass in Arizona. We have critical mass in Nevada, and we will in Florida. I think those companies are going to have a better chance of being around,
Right.
when the markets change. So hopefully, investors, good luck.
Yeah.
If I wish I could give them advice on what to look for. Everything's cheap, but I don't know. Is it?
Well, we'll see. All right, Peter, that's a great update. We'll leave it there for now and come back to you soon. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
If you're enjoying the show, subscribe to Midas Letter on YouTube so you stay up to date on everything investment. Hey, and so
I love
Green
this
Growth
dude.
Brands adding 15% today to close at $1.50, 20 cents on the day. Peter Horvath, obviously one of the legends of branding in the space. That's in the cannabis space. But now Todd here has got some interesting insight on a whole new sector that is kind of cannabis related, but kind of not. I'll let Todd talk about it.
Yeah, listen, there's a big buzzword going on right now and in the industry, and it's not e-gaming. That's one of them too. By the way, I love EGLX. I'm allowed to say that, but I work with them too. Okay, I'm not really like anyway. Mushrooms and psychedelics is.
Champignons magiques.
Do you know anything about them, Jay?
Oh, a thing or two. I've been to the outer reaches of the galaxy thanks to magic mushrooms.
Oh, I see. Well, I may or may not have microdosed myself, but I really, at the end of the day, one of the things, and we touched on this earlier, is about natural medications and helping with depression, helping with anxiety, helping with PTSD, a post-traumatic stress disorder. And there's a lot of issues that humans have, and they've come to the forefront where we want to make sure that we ensure the safety of the mind. And I don't think we've done enough in this day and age still. I don't care if you're tweeting Bell Let's Talk, that's not enough. Enough is how do you actually cope with this? And there's a lot of studies going in right now into this space to see can that help that. Of course, there are no medical claims that can be made at this point, but that grabbed my attention. And to be quite honest with you, there was suicide in my wife's family very recently, and it makes you study this stuff a lot more closely. And when there was an opportunity for me to get involved, and I met some people in the Netherlands where this has been studied for much longer, and I'm really excited by the opportunity of a deal that I'm going to be a part of and a co-CEO, a part of that is in the psychedelic space.
Wow. So magic mushrooms, do you think they're going to be legalized anytime soon?
Well, we've seen the decriminalization right now in places like in Colorado,
Sure.
And Denver specifically, I believe.
Did you know that magic mushrooms are legal in Canada as long as they're not in a dried, harvested format?
So yeah, and this is one of the things you'll see. There's a lot of little places, Bulgaria, I believe, Brazil. There's some areas that you'll see that have different laws around this kind of stuff. And with the psychedelic space, I think what's important, and we're seeing it, Bruce Linton just attached his name to Mind, remind me, Mind something.
Remember,
It's
yeah.
going to be a Toronto-based company that's doing it. We're seeing this with Roadman Investments,
Right.
and Lit's their symbol, and I know. So I think we're at a point where if you can get to say where, was it Bedrocan that did like the kind of medical side out of Holland, that then now, I think they supply 50% of the medical cannabis to Europe. If you can kind of get, that's sort of, I think, a bit of our strategy, with some really interesting people on board that are going to make for an amazing management team, and to really explore in an EU GMP facility the space of where it's going to end up going. And I think that we're going to see lightened laws and people taking it much more seriously. And people are jumping on Rogan's podcast, and there's a lot of big names getting involved in the Kevin Matthews of the space, and so we'll see where it's all going.
Yeah, that's exciting. Well, congratulations, Todd. I wish you the best in that, and I hope to become an investor as soon as I can.
When I have more to say, I will, and I don't want any egg on my face right now because it's still in the works, but we're very close to sort of presenting this to investors. Very close to doing so. I mean, we're going through all the compliance and all of the legalities.
Very cool. If you want to follow Todd and his show more frequently, he's on at 5 p.m. weekdays on Sirius XM channel 167, I believe you said.
Canada Talks. It's a very newsy but fun channel, very progressive, and we deal with all things. I've dealt with the cannabis space for quite some time. I talk about the e-gaming space, the blockchain space. We get political and we get real. We're very genuine and very real.
Brilliant. And he's got his website at thetoddshapiroShow.com.
Thank you, man.
As well as the Twitter feed and everything. Just Google him. That is our show for today. If you have not subscribed, please do so at MidasLetter.com, and don't forget to join our Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and any other kind of social media feed you can find just by Googling Midas Letter. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you all tomorrow.
Thanks, dude.